Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me again for the Mind Games rescore breakdown. I'm joined today with my mentor of how many years now, Barrett?
Wow. I would say close to 10. Let's just round it to
10,
10.
yeah, 10 years. My mentor, when I met Barrett, Barrett Lewis, he was so gracious and kind because I knew next to nothing, like true Dunning-Kruger moment because I thought I was awesome. He very politely ushered me
Awesome.
into reality. I was not Barrett. Why should anyone care what you have to say?
Um, because I like to usher people into reality and tell them how much they actually suck. No, I'm just kidding. I am and have been a creative director for animation in all of its various formats for over 25 years. And I've also been a composer for about that same amount of time. And many of the projects that I've had the honor of directing, I've also had the privilege to compose for. And so that I think is really one of the things that makes me different than a lot of other directors or composers is that I really do truly have an equal passion for both. And I think you and I met on a project that I was composing for. It was actually a video game. I've done commercials, I've done short films, I've done video games and live installations and almost everything in between feature films, not by myself, but I've worked on feature films and not to toot my own horn, but I actually received an Emmy in 2021 for art direction.
Toot that horn. Not many people can say that.
Woot.
Yeah.
It's a very cool thing. After getting one, I my first question was, well, that's cool. I want to get another one. What other kinds of awards could I get? So that is my continual pursuit thus forward.
How long were you the creative director of Real Effects?
Yeah. So I started at Real Effects in 2001 as an animator. And so I was a character animator for at least a couple of years, which at the time the company was really small. It was maybe like 25 people and mostly doing commercials at the time. And it meant being a character animator there in a small studio like that really meant, needing to model and rig and animate, but also light and composite animation. And so you had to wear many hats. And then I eventually became creative director, I would say about 5 to 7 years into my career. I had to prove my worth and do my reps and work my way up the ladder of success, as they say.
Mm-hmm.
The company was also growing as well and grew to at one point it was over 400 people, and then opening up other studios in LA and also Montreal. So it became what we could call an international award-winning animation studio. And for those who are interested, you can see Real Effects is the name of the company and their work. Several of their movies are online on Netflix. Freebirds, Circles Around, or Thanksgiving, starring Woody Harrelson and Owen Wilson, voicing two turkeys that go back in time to change their fate away from being put on the Thanksgiving table. And then Book of Life is one directed by Jorge Gutierrez. That is the story about Manolo, I think I got his name right, going into the underworld. It's a Day of the Dead story to find his true love. And most recently, a animated series on Netflix called Supergiant Robot Brothers, which is actually the first animated series to be done entirely in an Unreal Engine.
That's very cool. I remember the first time we went on a tour and it was breathtaking. I I I remember being like, "Oh wow, this is for real.
Mhm.
This is real." I remember you giving us a tour through where all the animators and model workers worked, and it was just this sea of creative layout desks in like this low light. I remember the miles and miles of networking cable above us.
Yep.
The recording studios, all the professional posters of the projects on the wall. I was like, "Holy shit, this is real!" It felt like walking into a library. Everyone wanted to whisper, like,
Right. Yeah, it was I miss it. You know, COVID really messed up a lot of that and thankfully a company like Real Effects was very nimble digitally and was able to adapt to where everyone was working from home during those years. But yeah, when everyone was at that big studio, it was like a 75,000 foot square foot place with at least 300 of those employees that you're mentioning. And yeah, just I miss like the walls were just adorned with concept art and sketches and people were in the middle of pitching and the modelers when they're not modeling in Maya in 3D, they're actually sculpting with clay and
I
um
remember seeing clay sculptures. That was very cool.
yeah. Yeah, and I mean, you know, just to to this day, some of the best talent that you will see in film was right there in that building in Deep Ellum,
And
Texas.
you being the creative director had to see the whole vision of the film. So you approach things with um, a full perspective, if I, for a lack of a better term, where
Yeah.
I'm just a composer. That's all I do is this one thing. And you have to look at all of it. So you're going to be shedding light that we normies like just don't have. You know what I'd like to do is first start with the oh, I started prematurely. First, what I'd like to start is looking at the original composer's work, and we'll just talk about it. Whatever works, what's good about it, what could have been better. You know, there are no wrong answers. Anything you have to say
By
is
the way, I
good.
haven't seen this. I've
Oh,
seen your version of it, but I haven't seen this
right,
original.
right. That's excellent to add. Yeah, this will be Barrett's first exposure, so everything will be off the cuff. All right, here we go. Can you hear that? Okay.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Okay.
What is the meaning of life?
Yeah.
To free your mind from the constructs of public
Yeah,
education.
yeah, yeah. And what is he like? 8? What is
Yeah,
he to me?
I'm assuming this is elementary school. Um, it's so wonderfully classic. I'm over here thinking like, do kids actually still use pencil and paper?
Hmm.
Back in my day. Um, cool. Well, I that's cool. I'm seeing and hearing this original version for the first time. All right, did you want to talk about that, or do you want to go right into yours
Yeah,
and then
let's
we'll
let's
compare
tag
both?
like what was good, what could have been done better.
Hmm.
So the first thing I noticed, you know what? Never mind. You go first.
Oh, well, I think what's interesting about it is that it is a little bit more of what I would call like a song, or maybe you could consider it an underscore, which
My
I think,
my thoughts
you know,
exactly. I was going to say that exactly.
yeah, and I think it does what it does right is that it um because it's not trying to emphasize the hit points, it sort of
Setting the mood.
works. It works as a montage
Hmm.
nicely. Um, and aside from my, personal feelings about the type of music, the style of music, the instruments being chosen, and that sort of thing, I think that you could argue that sometimes simplicity is a good thing. Um, that being said, I think that it's it's I know that your approach is more orchestral and Mickey Mousing, which I think is also really successful and wonderful, and so I think it's just two completely different approaches to creating a score for this film. One thing that I did like is being able to hear the sound effects, and for all those listening out there, for composers like us, it's always nice to be able to find a version of the film that doesn't have music. So filmmakers, animators, producers, all you guys, if you're able to and willing, please share a version of your films without the music so that other composers, and also sound effects, so that other sound designers and
Hmm.
composers can practice their skills as
It's free
well. And
publicity too, because
yeah,
composers are hungry for rescore material, just to practice, and that's just more eyeballs on your film.
yeah, 100%.
I completely agree with your assessment. So this was a different approach. Um, so in this series, I explained the difference between vibe scoring or mood scoring, thematic scoring, and scoring to picture. This is definitely a mood score, and not that that's bad. It's just a different approach. It just kind of sets the mood. Now, to this composer's credit, he's he did change it somewhat, in different places in order to try and align with the story.
Oh yeah, yeah. There's definitely storytelling in there. Um, I
It,
noticed
it
those.
wasn't just the same tune. I mean, it is one continuous tune, but it didn't stay in one single emotion the whole time.
Right.
But
Yeah, it definitely had. I mean, it paired well with the film. It was timed well with the film. So yeah, good point. It wasn't. I forgive me if I made it sound like you just basically wrote a
oh
song
no,
and
no,
but I noticed the tempo changes and dynamic changes
I
that
think
were
a couple of
very,
key changes maybe in there.
yeah, right. Yeah, yeah, like when it got to the alarm was going off. I guess
Mm-hmm.
there was like a megaphone and
Mm-hmm.
like word fire. And, the way that the music changed there, I
Mm-hmm.
thought was good.
He didn't really soften it though around, let's see, around this point. Let's see. So,
There's so many from
I,
an
I thought
animation.
this. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, from an animation standpoint, as we pause and on these frames, there's some really good poses of this brain character.
Mm-hmm. Um. So this, my internet's laggy. So during this part, he looks at the question here on the test, and then looks kind of sad over at his person here, and then looks out into the window. There was a lot of emotions there that I thought were just kind of glossed over. There was actually a few cases of this where it could have helped. It could have helped the story by aligning a little more closely. But again, this is two different approaches. Okay, so I'm gonna refresh my browser here, and we'll watch mine. Okay, impressions.
Bravo, bravo. Yeah, I have an affinity for that nostalgic classic cartoon Mickey Mousing. Composers that come to mind are um oh man, what was okay, Scott Bradley did Tom and Jerry.
Yeah.
Raymond Scott, I think, did a lot of the Warner Brothers music.
Yeah, well, that said, why did they call it Mickey Mousing? It was clearly Warner Brothers, Looney Tunes that did this far, far more. It's weird that Mickey Mouse gets the gets the
That's a,
title.
yeah, that's a really good question. I think that it was probably something that that may have started with one and then, ended up being coined. There were a lot of Mickey Mouse shorts that were being done, back then as well as the Looney Tunes stuff. And I think the Mickey Mouse stuff maybe may have come first. So maybe that's why it gets the
Maybe.
credit.
So do you think this approach, my approach, do you think let me first let me couch that for a second. Um, full disclosure to the audience, we are friends, and Barrett is very nice to me, but he doesn't lie to me. um, uh, which one would you pick if I was pitching? There's composers, two composers for the job. Which one would you pick and why?
Yeah. Okay, so putting our friendship aside, I do personally have an affinity for classic cartoon music. We could call it mid-century Mickey Mousing. I also love the use of the orchestra, so I'm biased already by that. Um, beyond our being friends, and so I would choose this approach Again, to give props to the original composer, who I'm assuming was a student at I think it was Ringling School of Art and Design where this film was created. And those students are just awesome. But yeah, I think that, with an orchestra, especially the quirky one, you've added some sounds that are unique, kind of bespoke sounds for this type of thing. I think there may have been some theremin in there, some whistling, some other, you know, whimsical kind of instruments, not found in a standard orchestra, but added to. And I think that that already adds this complexity of flavor that is fun, beyond just the, guitar, bass, and drums, piano type band approach, which I might describe the first one as. Again, not a bad thing, just a different approach. But I'm biased. I would choose this approach.
Which one do you think? Um, well, no, let's stop comparing. The comparison. Do you think this approach tells the story well?
I do. That I think there's some things that the first composer got right, and there's some things that you got right, and those are different. Um, and it sort of opens up that question of, okay, if I was going to score this film, I would make a lot of decisions that I thought were right, and I might, have someone else critique it and point out some things that I got wrong or some things that I missed, and so that's just that wonderful, um, you know, relative kind of
Sure.
world of art that we live in. Yeah.
I often say composing is creative problem solving. It's like a puzzle with no one right answer. You're piecing it together.
Yeah, right. Like, like you run into, here's a moment in the film that's communicating a certain type of emotion, and what you bring to the table is your interpretation of what that
Mm-hmm.
emotion sounds like. And that's
Mm-hmm.
the beauty of scoring to picture, is that you're essentially a storyteller and your language is music. Um, and so I think you did a fantastic job telling this story. It's it's crazy, and frenetic and wild, and that's not easy. If anyone's ever tried this type of composing, it's not easy to get all those things, to stitch them together, and for it to feel like this cohesive piece, because the emotions with this style of animation, they call it pose to pose, like very quick, snappy. We'll switch from one situation to another extremely fast, and there's a lot of moments that are fast cuts, and so it does make it very challenging to compose
When
for some.
I was breaking this down, one of the things I explained to the people listening about my approach is that the way I view it is each few moments is a micro scene. Instead of trying to compose an entire thing, here's a little bite, here's a little bite, there's a little bite, and it's shockingly short.
Yeah,
We're talking like maybe one might be 5 seconds long, might be 3 seconds long, and you got to
right.
switch. And I don't only Mickey Mouse. Sure, it's dense, but I switch where I thought it was appropriate. To like now we set the mood.
Yeah, you've got a theme in there. Ba, 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 bum, bum, ba, 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 da, 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 da.
And it pops up a few times. We hear it here in the introduction.
Mhm,
We hear the big chunk of it start about here.
mhm.
Um, we hear it about, bear with me, there when he's fading back to reality. It touches on it, and then we close with it big and grand, and then intimate piano. Do you
So
think
those
I'm
moments are like the big the shifts in the story. Like, the setup is the brain comes out, and then the question is, well, what's about to happen next? And that sort of moment is a shift in the storytelling. And and I don't remember the other points that you made, but then like at the end where he's like, okay, he's got to go back to the schoolhouse and get back in this kid's head is another important storytelling shift. So I think you chose those moments well to use that theme that you wrote.
Hmm. What are your thoughts on a through line um, and filmmaking, just in general, not necessarily just this?
Um, that's a pretty wide open question. Like, there's a lot of different ways to form connectivity, connective tissue. You can do that through framing, you can do that through lighting, you can do that through color, you can do that through motion, um, stage direction, music, sound design, all of those things working together can, really uh, homogenize and make a piece come together.
My point about a through line earlier in this series is that sometimes the music in the film can feel like two things, and a through line, well placed, reappearing here and there, makes it feel like one thing. It's not the music and the movie. The music is the movie.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Like our job as composers for picture, um, or composers for storytelling is to serve the project, to serve the film, if it's a film, or to serve the game if you're composing, tracks for a video game or any other interactive experience or something that's not, what we're talking about. And that is also a balance that you have to have with, internally with your own ego as a creative is to, set aside what, and this is more true when you're working with, professionals. In this case, this was you having fun, and you didn't actually have the director or producer or any of the filmmakers telling you what they wanted, because that becomes a effort in itself to accommodate their direction and their requests, which we can get into at some point. It's hilarious sometimes what clients will ask for. But in this case, this was a personal project for you, and that gives you a lot of freedom. But your ultimate goal was how well can I tell this story? And your goal was not let me show off my writing skills. I mean, maybe some of that was in there, but ultimately you're trying to help the story. You're trying to do your best to emphasize musically what you're seeing visually.
I heard Danny Elfman once say in a commentary on Edward Scissorhands, sometimes the composer's job is to know when to shut up.
Yeah.
There's a scene in that movie where they're sitting around the table having dinner, and he was like, what would serve the story best? No music here. This is where you shut up.
Yeah.
It's not the Danny Elfman show, right? It's Edward Scissorhands, and that's how
Yeah.
I try to approach when I'm even my personal projects. This I could have done anything I wanted to, you know, but I try to serve the story. That's what I'm practicing to do.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. And there's another film, There Will Be Blood, is famous for having very, very little music. And it often shows up when composers are looking for material to score to. And I actually studied a few scenes back in the day when I wanted to practice, and I found some scenes through that from that film, and um, in spotting some of those scenes, I decided actually this is better without music, and I ended up not doing it.
Makes sense.
I'd be interested to watch, and I know it probably doesn't exist, but I'd be interested to watch this short film with no music and see how much is. is potentially lacking,
Mm.
without it.
I'm curious. What could I have done better? Let's switch it instead from your honest praise to, to your honest critique. What
Hmm.
could I have done better? What fell short? Um, no,
Man,
no wrong answers.
I mean, let me think. I think if the only thing that may have stood out to me is actually a very nitpicky thing, and probably not as much of a this could be better as much of a as it might be a I might have done this differently doesn't make it better, but I think I think giving a break from the brass would be good because brass is very loud and in your face, and there was a moment right before the seesaw that he was doing. Did he split himself into
Yeah,
two?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think
Calmed it down there.
I might have done the same thing that you did, like harmonically, but instead of the brass, I might have just used winds
Ah,
to soften it a little
mm-hmm.
bit, and then that gives dynamic room to build back up to the
That's an
brass.
excellent point. That's an excellent
And
point.
like I this takes a lot of practice and reps, but giving instrument sections a break so that other instrument
Mm,
sections can take over really helps something not get too you don't want to overdo an idea. You know
yeah,
what I mean?
and I really liked your point about contrast too. If the brass is very loud, and if you're always up at, you know, 10, where
Yeah.
you don't have anywhere to go, so turning it back down a little bit, and when you come back to 10,
Mhm.
oh, it sounds impactful. That's a really good point. Anything
And
else?
it might be an interesting experiment to see if that same brass section could play it quietly. I don't think it would have worked in this case because there's not really a quiet. There's not a lot of quiet moments
Mm,
in visually in this film. Everything's very intense and caffeinated. Saturday afternoon
mm.
cartoon kind of over the top.
I missed that. Back to the Looney Tunes classic style. I'm trying to keep this tradition alive.
Yeah.
Cartoon music used to be really elevated. I mean, even if it was just Mickey Mousing, scoring to picture to an absurd level, they were geniuses that did this. I mean,
Yeah.
some of the most brilliant composers, and cartoons today are just it's just kind of drums and bass and quirky sounds
Yeah.
and just mood scoring.
Yeah, like the players had to record a take all together in the same take live to
Mm-hmm.
picture,
Mm-hmm.
playing some of the most difficult stuff that the composers could possibly write. Again, look up Raymond Scott. He's famous for, I think, the toy trumpet song. And there's a part in there. It's like and it's getting a octet or however many players he had to play so tight in some with something that difficult is incredibly challenging, and this is where like modern digital composing has helped us because it's really just a matter of how well can you do a mock-up.
Right.
But yeah, getting real players to play this, that would be a challenge. Like, hey, okay, let's take mind games and let's hire however many players we need. You want to do a 90-piece orchestra or maybe a smaller one, 40 to 50. Um, I wonder what kind of feedback we would get if we were to not change anything, give this to an orchestrator with the assignment of make the parts for all the players,
Mm-hmm.
um, and how that would need to go. You might have to record. the string players separately, the brass players separately, and then, mix them back together, that type of thing. But I'd be interested in that experiment.
I too have an affinity for that style. Once in a while, I will see it pop up on something modern, and I instantly love it. I think I've seen it most recently in a Rick and Morty. Was it Rick and Morty? No, no, no. It was it was their other show, created by Justin Roiland. The
It's not Adventure Time, is it?
no, no. What is that one? It's they're aliens from another planet, and they're zany characters. Like their planet was destroyed. I don't know. I can't remember what it's called. I'm sure the people in
There's
the
several like that. Yeah,
anyway.
I'm not as familiar with the Rick and Morty other work. I know Rick and Morty, that particular cartoon is hilarious. If I am understanding it right, inspired by Back to the Future, the relationship between Marty and Doc.
Yeah, yeah. Let me see. I'm burning time here. Oh, Solar Opposites. It's called Solar Opposites.
I haven't seen that.
Yeah. Um, it's it's really zany, and there's this one episode where the main character, who's kind of an ass, is trying to beat up someone else's dad. Like the kid, I think bullied his son, bullied maybe his son, and he was like, "Well, my dad can beat you up," and it's totally
By the way, I just texted you yesterday for anyone listening. My dad can beat up your
yeah,
dad.
yeah. It's totally cut from either Tom and Jerry or the Roadrunner and Coyote. It's just him trying to beat up this guy's dad and getting thwarted at every.
Hmm.
In the music, man. It's not even a particularly great episode, but the music made it amazing.
Great. Yeah, I love that. And yeah, I mean that makes me think of Walter Murphy and all the stuff he's been doing for Family Guy over the
Oh
years.
yeah, they've done that in Family Guy too.
Incredible. That composer, he is just as good with like jazz and big band as he is with classical. Really top-notch composer.
Well, I think we're winding down. Barrett, where can people find you?
Um, yeah, just I have a website, Barrett Lewis. It's Barrett. Lewis is Lewis.com. And from there, you can branch out into my other various socials that I'm doing my best to keep updated and keep track of. But yeah, I'm constantly in the middle of either directing something or composing something, or ideally both.
Um, can people reach out to you and hire you?
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can message me from the website, or DM me from your favorite social of choice, and I'll eventually get back to you. I'm pretty good at responding within 24 to 48 hours. So
Thank you so much for sharing your literally expert and professional opinion on my humble project. I really appreciate your time.
thanks, man.
Uh,
Yeah, absolutely.
all right.
Wonderful job, dude. Bravo.
Thank you so much. And guys, we'll see you soon. Barrett and I have been talking about films we love and breaking down the score one scene at a time. So look out for that. Thanks again. Bye, guys.